Gonzaga heads to Santa Clara to face a team that beat them last month at home with a top 2 seed in the WCC on the line. It's time to see what this club is made of.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, folks, we're going to discuss what's new with Santa Clara since last month when Gonzaga played them in Spokane. We're going to talk about what this game means for the Zags. We're also going to talk about what the Zags need to do to win this game. We remember last time these two teams played. We know some of the keys to a Gonzaga victory. We're going to talk about that and a few others. We're also going to close the show with an update on the Zag women's team, who unfortunately also lost on senior night on Saturday. Didn't get to it in Monday's show, but we'll talk about what it means for them to close out today's show. We start with the big thing, previewing tonight's battle. For those of you listening on Tuesday, Gonzaga going down to Santa Clara to take on Herb Sendek and the Broncos. February 25th, 8 p.m. Pacific time, another late one again. I've said this a few times. I think we might want to start getting used to these very late 8 p.m. type starts, especially when Gonzaga transitions into the Pac-12. I think we're going to see a lot of those depending on the media rights deal and things of that nature. Just to say, if you're one of the New York or East Coast listeners, might be some 11 p.m. tips coming your way in the future. This game will be on the CBS Sports Network again at 8 p.m. Zags lost to Santa Clara earlier this season. Once again, a game that was quite notable in the fact that Gonzaga gave up 103 points at home, the most points they've ever surrendered at the McCarthy Athletic Center. It was 2 losses in a row, coming off that emotional overtime loss to Oregon State at the Gill Coliseum. Gonzaga also lost to Santa Clara last year at Santa Clara, so this will be them trying to break a streak of, I guess not really a streak, but try to break having lost on the road to this team and now having lost at home to this team in 2 of their last 3 games against them. And it's basically the same team that beat them at home last year. This roster did not change much over the offseason. They brought back Carlos Stewart, who had transferred to LSU. He came back and replaced Carlos Marshall. Elijah Mahi's a new player for this team, but otherwise it's a lot of the same faces. Tyree Bryan, of course, who had the 35-point outburst the last time these two teams played in a game where Santa Clara shot a unbelievable 18 of 38 from 3, 47.5% on 18 made threes for the Broncos. Adama Alphabal had 20 in that game as well. Crazy enough for Santa Clara, that is not the most made threes they've had in a game or the highest percentage that they've had in a game with that number of attempts. They recently played Washington State on Saturday, beat them by 40, and scored 23 three-pointers, shot 60.5% from 3, 60%, and 23 made threes. This team is a wicked three-point shooting team. As it stands right now, they're 19-10 on the season, looking to get win number 20 for Coach Sendek. They're 11-5 in the WCC, gone 6-3 since they beat Gonzaga back on January 18th. 2 of those 3 losses were to St. Mary's. They got swept in the season series by the Gales. Everybody in the conference has been swept in the season series by the Gales, with the exception of San Francisco. For Santa Clara, their other loss was also at Oregon State. Very, very good team at the Gill Coliseum. Not a very good team on the road for Wayne Tinkle and the Beavers, but that's it in terms of losses for Santa Clara since that Gonzaga game. In that time, they also swept Washington State. They also beat up on some of the bottom teams in the conference, Portland, Pacific, San Diego, and then they also beat LMU, who had beat them previously, so earned a season split with the Lions of LMU. Currently, as I'm recording this on Monday morning afternoon, the Broncos are 53rd in the net. They need to remain top 75 for Gonzaga's game against them Tuesday to be quad 1. That's not going to be a problem. They're very comfortably inside the quad 1 category right now with very few games to go. So this is going to be a quad 1 opportunity for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Santa Clara, however, their resume, they're really hoping they're still on the bubble. I'll tell you right now, Santa Clara is playing for a chance to be on the bubble. You need to beat Gonzaga at home. So this is a must-win game for them in terms of making the NCAA tournament, outside of course, potentially going on a run in the WCC tournament. But for the Broncos, they're 2-4 in quad 1 games. They are 4-3 in quad 2 games. Not great. The 2-4 in quad one's fine. The 4-3 in quad two is okay, but they're 5-3 in quad three games, and that's just not going to get it done. It's too many bad losses for Herb Sendek's team. There ain't no in quad four great, but those 3 quad three losses I think are really killing them. And so for Gonzaga, this is an opportunity to likely put Santa Clara on a position where they're no longer even have a chance of getting an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. While for Gonzaga, obviously a win here is critical in terms of keeping on pace with being number 2 in the WCC tournament and getting that valuable double bye where they don't have to play until Monday with the championship game on Tuesday. It's obviously important for their NCAA tournament bids as well. I think a win here gets Gonzaga to be in a position where they're no longer very likely to end up on the bubble. Like if they beat Santa Clara in this game, even if you lose to San Francisco, and even if you lose the first game in the WCC tournament, which would be the absolute worst case scenario after beating Santa Clara, I think that's still enough to get in. Win this game, and I think you are pretty much outside of like a very, very, very outside chance you're making the NCAA tournament. Lose this game, and that odds of being left out on Selection Sunday just get a little bit higher. You've still got a chance. You still got a good chance, but they just get a little bit worse if you lose this basketball game. Again, the Santa Clara team red hot from 3. One key thing to keep an eye on, though, coming into this game, and as I'm recording this, I don't have a firm update for you, but Adama Alpha-Ball has not played in a couple of weeks for Santa Clara. There's not a lot out there on the updates. It sounds like he was expected to play recently, did not. There's a report of an illness. There's also a report of it being undisclosed why he's not playing. So I'm not sure the exact situation at this point. It's possible by the time you're listening to this, we have an update on it. Certainly by the time the game rolls around, we might have an update on it at that point. But for right now, he has not played since February 8th. It hasn't really impacted Santa Clara. Again, they had their massive 109.23 made 3 game against Washington State on the road without Adama Alpha-Ball, ostensibly their best player. He's averaging 13 points, 3 assists, 2.5 rebounds on the season. He's about 38% from 3 on about 6 3-point attempts per game. He is a high volume shooter. He is a NBA prospect, a guy that many thought would have gotten drafted last year had he not opted to return to the Broncos for another season. So certainly a name to keep an eye on. If he's not playing in this game, again, Santa Clara has been very good without him, but he is a phenomenal player. And that is not somebody, that if he's not in the game, that is an advantage for Gonzaga, even if they've played well without him. And then the last thing to keep an eye on in this game, Ryan Nembhard, 5 assists away from breaking Emmett Naar's record for single season assists in a season from a WCC player. Naar had 284 assists for St. Mary's in the 2018-19 season, which is incredible. To do that, not only is 284 assists in a season an insane number, but to do that in an offense that plays at the pace that St. Mary's plays at is just incredible. Huge shout out to Emmett Naar for having that record. But Ryan Nembhard's going to break it. He's going to break it probably in this game tonight against Santa Clara. He's only needs 4 to tie it, 5 to break it. He's averaging just under 10 per game. He had 15 the last time these two teams played each other. So he's going to break this record. If it doesn't happen in this game, that's probably not good news for Gonzaga in terms of winning the basketball game, unfortunately, but he'll still then break it against San Francisco. And he's also 20 assists away from 300, which would be the 6th player to do that since 1993. Maybe he gets that between the Santa Clara and San Francisco games. That would be exactly 10 per game. Maybe he doesn't, but he's going to get it in the WCC tournament. He's certainly going to get in the NCAA tournament, assuming Gonzaga makes it that far. So he's in a good position to get to 300. He's in a very good position to at least break the WCC record. He's obviously already broken Gonzaga's single season record, a record that he set last year. But it'd be really fun to see him get into that 300 assist conversation just because of how rare it is in college basketball. Well, folks, it's pretty clear the things Gonzaga needs to do differently in this game. It's not going to be a secret. It's not going to be a lot of shocks in the keys to victory for this particular game, knowing what went wrong last time out. We're still going to get to those. We're going to talk about what we want to see from this Gonzaga team in this game. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, March basketball is almost here, and there is no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you can just pick more or less on at least 2 players' stat projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy, and it keeps every game exciting. Prize Picks even offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. For today, I did over 14.5 points for Bam Adebayo and over 0.5 steals for Elliot Cadeau of the North Carolina Tar Heels. If both those things hit, I double up my money. That simple. Folks, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still getting ready for tonight's battle against the Broncos of Santa Clara, team that beat Gonzaga back in January, team that beat Gonzaga last year on the road in this game. So Gonzaga has got a lot of motivation to get a W here to even the season series, to win another game on the road, to get a quad one win, to put themselves in a better position to be higher, 2 or a 3 seed, definitely a 2 seed, ideally in the WCC tournament, to make their NCAA tournament hopes more comfortable. Lots on the line. Lots on the line. We talked about a lot of that in the first segment. Now I want to talk about what does Gonzaga need to do to actually make sure they do win this basketball game against the Santa Clara team that has really had their number the last couple of years and whose strengths really line up poorly with Gonzaga's weaknesses so far. That's why we've seen them struggle against them so much in the last 2 years. Key number 1, pretty obvious. Do not abandon shooters. The perimeter defense needs to not only be better than the last time these two teams played, like dramatically, worlds better, twice as good, 5 times as good. I don't know, whatever you need it to be. Way, 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 way better. Now, the good news is that for the most part, since that game, Gonzaga's perimeter defense has been better. They have improved in that area. Case in point, Emmanuel Innocenti did not play against Santa Clara. It doesn't feel like that game was that long ago, but also the rise of Emmanuel Innocenti from not in the rotation, playing a minute or 2 at the end of the first half and garbage time, to now being a 20-plus minute per game key contributor for this team has happened in that time period because he didn't play in this game. That's kind of an indication of how different this Gonzaga team is. And he is, it's such an important part of this game because that is what he brings to the table. Elite screen navigation, relentless on-ball pressure, length on the perimeter to get a hand up on open shooters. He provides the things that Gonzaga lacked the last time these two teams played. But Santa Clara is a whole different animal. This team is such a good, high-volume three-point shooting team. KenPom has them as 28th in the country at 37.6% from beyond the arc. As a team, they're shooting close to 38% from 3. Basketball Reference says that they shoot 28.6 three-point attempts per game, which is 24th in the country. They're top 25 in terms of three-point attempts per game. They make 10.7 three-pointers per game. Folks, that is 7th. They are the 7th most. They make the 7th most threes of any team in college basketball. It was not, 7 of 7 to start the second half, 18 made threes. I don't want to say it's a fluke, but this team has done this. Again, 18 made threes against Gonzaga at 47%. For the vast majority of teams in college basketball, that would be unquestionably, not even debatably, their best three-point shooting game of the season. It is not even close for Santa Clara because their performance against Washington State, 23 made threes on 60% shooting, is way better. Both of those were road games for Santa Clara, and they went out and shot the absolute crap out of the basketball. This team is very, very good at shooting threes. They have 6 shooters who are over 37% on the season and over 2 attempts per game. Elijah Mahi's about 44% on 2.5 attempts per game. Tyree Bryan, we know his name now, 39.5% on 4.5 attempts per game. Carlos Stewart, 39.3% on 5.2 attempts per game. Johnny O'Neal, 38.8% on 4.2 attempts per game. Bretton Napper, 41.7% on 2.1 attempts per game. And then again, not sure if Adama Alpha Ball will play in this game, but he is about 37.8% on just over 6 attempts per game. Tons of high volume shooters, tons of highly effective shooters. You don't exactly know who's going to get hot, but one of these guys, if not 2 of these guys, is probably going to have a big night shooting the Brock because every single game, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these guys have big games. If it's 4, good luck winning that basketball game. Gonzaga has to defend the perimeter as well as they have this entire season. And they're still going to probably give up a decent amount of made threes. Fortunately for Gonzaga, this is a team that is not great defensively. Gonzaga scored 99 against them last time. They can more than capable of getting up over 90 in this game. So you gotta beat this team by scoring more points than them, because they're going to find a way to get their looks, even if Gonzaga's defense is significantly improved. One of the other better ways to prevent Santa Clara from getting 3 points on the offensive end is to turn them over. Get turnovers, force those turnovers, and score off those turnovers. You have to capitalize on mistakes made by Santa Clara. This team has a turnover rate of 17.1%. It's 170th in the country. Slightly average, basically exactly average in the country in terms of how often they turn the basketball over. Their non-steal turnover rate, again, we've utilized this stat a handful of times. It's one of the handy ones on KenPom. This is basically the time, again, non-steal turnover. So any type of turnover that Santa Clara could commit that's not Gonzaga taking the basketball away from them. Traveling violations, shot clock violations, passing the ball out of bounds, whatever it may be of that nature. Their non-steal turnover rate is 8.6%. That's 296th. That's very bad. This team makes mistakes with the basketball at a high clip and turns themselves over, whether it's, again, the shot clock violations, travelings, things like that. Gonzaga has to capitalize on those mistakes. Ideally, you get those steals. We've seen, again, this perimeter defense far more aggressive lately. Jump in passing lanes to try to get steals is risky, because usually if you make a mistake there and you're out of position, it forces the rest of the defense to scramble. It often leads to open looks. This is not a team you want to give open looks to. So there is some risk involved in how aggressive do you want to be. Certainly you don't want to be hand checking a bunch and getting your guards in foul trouble, but also, if they're getting dribble penetration, what we saw last time is Gonzaga sent their other perimeter defenders to pinch in on the dribble driver, whether it was Alpha Ball or Stewart, to avoid them getting a open look at the rim, or to avoid Graham Ike or Braden Huff from having to come over and potentially pick up a foul. The problem with that is that they were able to just then swing the ball out to the perimeter, and guys like Hickman and Battle and whomever weren't quick enough and aren't long enough to get out and defend those 3-point shots, and Brian just went nuclear and made a whole bunch of them. In this game, Gonzaga can't really do that. So the best thing to do is to avoid giving up dribble penetration at all. That's where somebody like Emmanuel Innocenti comes into play, of preventing them from doing that, but also knock the ball loose, get those steals, force them to, don't let them get complacent in their offense. Go knock the ball away, run more press. I don't think you'll see zone, because zone's a bad idea against a team that shoots this well and with this high volume, but go out there, run the press, try to get takeaways, try to score in transition, get yourself some opportunities to get some easy buckets at the rim, and prevent Santa Clara from getting an open shot or even any kind of shot at all, because this team's also a very good rebounding team. And that leads to key number 3, which was the key against St. Mary's and is a key here. Crash the glass. Gonzaga got out-rebounded by 8 last time. It was a 4-point game, and Gonzaga got out-rebounded by 8. That is a big enough difference to have accounted for that loss for the Zags. Broncos had 10 offensive rebounds in that game. That's killer. That's killer. They're a top 75 offensive rebounding team in the country. They are not St. Mary's, who's 3rd. They're, I think, 71st, according to KenPom. But they're still a decent offensive rebounding team. They have a ton of size, right? 35th in the country in average height. This is a big team. This is a team that, because of the volume of 3-point shots that they take, what that ultimately results in is a lot of long rebounds. And long rebounds, especially for a team that has bigger guards, like Alpha Ball is 6'5", 6'6", Stewart's a bigger point guard, like Tyree Bryan's a big guy. Like, they have big guards who are going to be able to outmuscle Nembhard and Hickman for basketballs, especially long rebounds that end up out at the free throw or 3-point line. So for Gonzaga, you got to limit their second chance opportunities. You got to prevent them from getting those offensive rebounds, getting a second look. Because if your defense was good enough to force them to miss a 3, and then they get an offensive rebound and they get another look, they're probably going to knock it down. And that is killer. Nothing hurts more than forcing a missed shot, having the team get the offensive rebound, and then they knock down 3. It's just killer. And at home, that place is going to blow up anytime that happens. So you got to crash the glass, got to prevent them from getting those long rebounds. Box out is crucial, even on 3-point shooters. And I know, we always want to pinch a little bit and try to get out in transition and assume that Graham or Braden or whoever will get the rebound and you'll be able to get out and run. But if, Nembhard and Hickman are starting to fly up the floor and a long rebound bounces right to Carlos Stewart and he's able to hit an open shot, that's bad basketball. You got to avoid that. You got to wait and make sure you get the rebound before you try to get out in transition and get some buckets that way. Key number 4, again, I don't want to recycle the exact same keys from the St. Mary's game, but it's just so important. You need Khalif Battle in this one. You need Khalif Battle in this one. The Zags scored 99 points last time against Santa Clara. Khalif Battle did not have a single one of them. He didn't score against this team. a team that has bigger guards, but a team that is not very good defensively, a team that doesn't block a lot of shots, a team that doesn't have a lot of rim protection or enforcement down low. Khalif Battle should have been a huge part of the game plan last time out. He should have been bullying his way past those guards. He should have been challenging Christoph Tilly and the other bigs at the rim. He should have been getting to the free throw line. Instead, in that game, he played 20 minutes. He had 0 of 4, 0 of 3 from 3, which means he only attempted one shot inside the three-point line. He did not get to the free throw line. He had 2 assists and a rebound. He also had 3 turnovers. A brutally bad game from Khalif Battle. And again, the three-point shooting is what downed the Zags in that game. Giving up 103 points is what downed the Zags in that game. Getting out-rebounded by 8 is what downed the Zags in that game. But I guarantee you, if Khalif Battle was the player that he is about half the time when he scores 20 or more points in about half of Gonzaga's WCC games, that's a really challenging player for Santa Clara, who, again, is not a good defensive team to deal with. He needs to be that guy. If he's just settling for corner three-point attempts and not looking to get to the rim, not looking to put pressure on the defense to bend their defense, that's a huge problem. It is time for Khalif Battle to show up. It's been time. It's been time. And he's done it at times, and it's been great, and it's wonderful, and it's magical. But he also just completely disappears. And if he does that in this game, I think that's a huge hurdle that Gonzaga may not be able to overcome. Key number 5 kind of goes in the same vein. Let the dogs out. This Gonzaga team has a lot of emotion, but they don't seem to have a lot of dog. Like, they don't have a lot of just like, we're going to be a little mean, we're going to be a little nasty, we're going to be a little aggressive and physical, and we're going to establish our culture, what we want to be, the game that we want to play. We're going to impose that on you and make you adjust to us. Gonzaga has not been able to do that. They have let teams like St. Mary's and Santa Clara and Oregon State and others dictate how the game flow is going to go, and then have attempted to adjust to that, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But it is time to go out there, and instead of being emotional where you're complaining to the referees and you're getting technical fouls early in basketball games or late in basketball games that cause you to get benched, go out there and be mean in a way where you're dunking the basketball, where you're screaming and flexing at the crowd, where you're putting this Santa Clara team on their heels early in this basketball game. Establish who you are. Don't be emotional because the crowd is yelling at you. Don't be emotional because you don't like the call from the officials. Don't make your starting point guard be screaming at you during a free throw to tell you to calm down so you don't get a technical foul with like 15 minutes left in the game. Don't be that. Be the people who go out there and just establish who you are. Make Santa Clara be a little bit afraid of you. Make Santa Clara be a little bit back on their heels, a little uncomfortable with the press. Have Michael Ajayi woofing and yelling right in your face. Have Khalif Battle throwing down thunder dunks in transition and giving a little nod to the crowd. You need to have a little bit of that arrogance back. You need to have a little bit of that confidence back, because right now it's not there. This team just laid down and died in the last 5 minutes against St. Mary's in one of the most shockingly embarrassing performances I've seen from this club. There was no reason for that. They went from a 1-point deficit to an 8-point deficit because of back-to-back made threes and a free throw from Mikey Lewis. And then they put in a half-hearted effort to get back into that game. No more. Bring the dang dogs and go out there and send Santa Clara a message that you're still the top dog. You're still the team to beat. You're still a scary basketball program in Spokane, Washington, because I don't think they're afraid of us right now. We need to let them know that they should be. Well, folks, moving on, switching gears to talk about the Zag women, who also lost at home on senior night. We're going to talk about what that means for them. They're now tied for first place in the WCC. What does it mean? We discuss that in just a second. But first, folks, get ready to bring your favorite Zags to life. VarsityIcons.com delivers the ultimate collection of action figures that honor current and former Zags. Varsity Icons is the premier sports collectible figure for your Gonzaga Bulldogs. Today, we highlight everybody's fan favorite, Ben Gregg. Varsity Icons was started by a longtime Gonzaga Bulldogs fan who wanted to create collectible figures of everyone's all-time favorite Zags. The mission of Varsity Icons is to create figures of current and former Zags for everybody to collect and enjoy. And there's no question that Varsity Icons wanted to highlight Ben Gregg to be their first player. He has been a fan favorite since joining the Zags back in 2021. Ben exemplifies what it means to be a Gonzaga Bulldog every time he steps on the court. We are excited to create more of your favorite Zags in the future, so stay tuned. And order your Varsity Icons Ben Gregg figure today at varsityicons.com. Varsity Icons, where icons live forever. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're closing out the show with an update from over the weekend on Lisa Fortier and the Gonzaga women's basketball team, who played their senior night game at noon on Saturday, 8 hours before Gonzaga started their game, or 5 hours, before Gonzaga started their game against St. Mary's. And unfortunately, both teams were unable to get a W on senior night. Tough to see that for these teams. The Lady Zags lost to San Francisco, 70-68. Was the final score. The Zags were actually up 9 at halftime, 34-25, but outscored by 8 in the third quarter. Back and forth affair for the rest of the fourth quarter that unfortunately did not fall Gonzaga's way. It ended a 13-game winning streak for the Zags and also caused them to be swept in the season series by the Dons of San Francisco. As the senior night game for the 5 starters in this game for the Zags, that would be Yvonne Ejim, who's of course a fifth-year senior after coming back last year, Maud Hybens, who missed some time this year with a concussion, Esther Little, who's been a big piece of this team for the last few years, and then 2 other players who started the season out injured but have been huge parts since they've returned from those injuries, Bree Sallenbien and St. Mary's transfer guard Taylor Dalton. All 5 drew the start. All 5 played 20-plus minutes in this game. Allie Turner, who's been one of their key players, probably their second-best player this year, she came off the bench but played 31 minutes. Claire O'Connor, 24 minutes off the bench as well. But the Zags just struggled to shoot it in this one. 7 of 22 from 3, about 32%. They also had 17 turnovers. Meanwhile, San Francisco, 10 of 26 from 3, 38%. That's going to get it done. Yvonne Ejim, a very big game for her back at home in her final game at the McCarthy Athletic Center. 19 points, 8 boards, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. 8 of 14 from the field, 3 of 4 from the free throw line. Maud Hybens also had a big game in the front court. 16 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, 7-11 from the field, 1 of 2 from 3, and 1 of 2 from the free throw line. So this not only ends a 13-game winning streak for Gonzaga, but it means they're tied with the University of Portland for first place in the WCC. Both these 2 teams have been phenomenal. Both teams are 15-3 in the conference right now. Portland's significantly farther ahead of Gonzaga in the net ranking. Portland's at 76 right now, whereas Gonzaga's at 110. Of course, that is because Portland had a much stronger non-conference. Didn't play as many good teams, but I'm not sure if they lost any games in the non-conference, or if they did, they only lost 1 game, whereas, of course, Gonzaga lost 5 non-conference games, really struggled in that spot. Wazoo's 2.5 games back from Portland and Gonzaga, so they are the top two teams in the conference. Portland and Gonzaga are going to finish 1 and 2. And frankly, if they end up tied, the fact that Gonzaga beat Portland both times in the regular season is critical. Gonzaga still has the advantage in terms of being the number 1 overall seed going into the WCC tournament and winning the regular season outright. It's very plausible that these 2 teams do end up tied. Both have 2 games remaining. For Gonzaga, they're at Pacific on February 27th, and then they are at Santa Clara on March 1st. Portland has at San Francisco, which is a tough game. They're also at Pacific. Portland beat both those teams already this year at home. Very possible they beat both of them on the road. Gonzaga beat both these teams at home. Very possible they beat both of them on the road. Again, wouldn't be surprised if both these teams finish 17-3 in the WCC. If that happens, Gonzaga does have the tiebreaker. They do finish first in the WCC. But if Gonzaga loses another game, if they lose to Pacific, if they lose to Santa Clara, then Portland has an opportunity, assuming they win both their games, to be the outright regular season champion in the WCC. Again, Gonzaga's worst case scenario is second, so they will still get that double bye in the WCC tournament. As we've laid out before, there's not going to be an at-large bid. I think Portland, if they win every single remaining game and then lose to Gonzaga in the WCC tournament, maybe there's a chance, maybe, but I think it's pretty unlikely. I think if you lose to Gonzaga all 3 times in a season, especially a Gonzaga team that frankly hasn't been at the top of the game the way that they have in the past, I don't think Portland would get in at that point. So these two teams are playing for those top 2 seeds, but they're also playing to get in that championship game and win it. Portland's done it the last 2 years. Gonzaga, this is not a year where they can afford to lose that game in Vegas. So it's going to be fun to see how it plays out. Before we get there, though, of course, Gonzaga's got 2 more games. They're at Pacific on the 27th. They beat Pacific at home, but just by 4 last time out. The Tigers 9-9 in the WCC, 13-15 overall, 178th in the net. Meanwhile, for Santa Clara, this is a team they beat by 26 last time they played them. That was at home. This will be a road game for Gonzaga, but again, they handled this Santa Clara team. That's not very good. They're 8-10 in the WCC. They're 14-14 overall. They're 210th in the net. So Gonzaga's 100 spots higher than them in the net. They're 75-ish spots higher than Pacific in the net. They should win both these games. They should win both these games, close out the regular season 17-3. At that point, there is no possibility that you are not the first place team in the WCC. You are guaranteed to be the number one seed in the WCC tournament if you win these two games. That is the situation for Gonzaga because of the regular season sweep of UP. So that's the status. We're going to talk more about those games. We're going to talk about how they do in those games, what it means for them going in the WCC tournament later this week. We'll, of course, talk about it as we get into actual WCC tournament time next week as well. But, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Special shout out to the everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. Again, we'll be back on Wednesday recapping Gonzaga's game against Santa Clara tonight. Have a fantastic day. Try not to be too anxious about this game. I know the late games when we're feeling the strain is not particularly fun, especially those of you out on the East Coast, but this should be a fun one. We'll recap the game on Wednesday, get you ready for that game against San Francisco later in the week as well. Thanks again. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.